Director, and she's been in her new position as USDA Rural Development Rural Business Cooperative Service Administrator for about 7 weeks. Administrator Betsy Dirksen Lonergan has over 20 years of experience in the nonprofit sector, working with community, regional, and state leaders to effect positive change, and is the lead for the Illinois Basin Rapid Response Team for the Interagency Working Group for Energy Communities. She is a lifelong resident of Springfield, Illinois, and is proud that her family members still own and operate the Centennial Farm in central Illinois, where her grandmother was raised. She graduated from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and is a former director at the University of Illinois Springfield. Administrator Dirksen Lonergan, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Sorry, I don't know if you guys can hear all the sirens in the background. Is that being blocked out, or do I need to use a different microphone?
You're fine. We can hear you well.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure. So I'm really excited to be here. 7 weeks in, and somebody was asking me how are things going? And I said, well, yeah, it's like drinking from a fire hose, but the water tastes real good. So it's great work, great people, and I'm thrilled to be here. So I want to say thank you for participating in the Cooperative Statistics meeting of the Interagency Working Group on Cooperative Development. It is a pleasure to address all of you. So the 2014 Farm Bill authorized the Secretary of Agriculture to chair its working group to ensure that coordinating is happening across agencies on cooperative development. I appreciated in the introduction the note about the energy community work, and I can't express deeply enough what a pleasure it is to work with our sister and brother federal agencies. It has been it's been fantastic, and I'm sure you're experiencing the same thing. Cooperatives are controlled democratically by their member patrons who use, finance, and own their business. Since members receive profits from the business in the form of patronage refunds, cooperative income, and everything stays in the local economy. Corporations generally must maximize profits for shareholders. In contrast, cooperatives can have multiple goals, including helping their members, employers, suppliers, community, other cooperatives, and the environment. As a result, cooperatives are incredibly creative and can really implement those creative solutions, especially in times of crisis. For example, worker cooperative members can change their operations or opt to take smaller paychecks rather than have to dismiss workers or to close down altogether. Farmers can change how they market and how they process their produce. Cooperative grocers can rely on their relationships with local producers and have some flexibility in how they address the changes in the supply chain. Co-op retailers, they can move real quickly in response if they need to in terms of e-commerce. Additionally, cooperatives are ideally situated to fill market gaps. Broadband, electric, rural grocery stores, farmer cooperatives are all examples of businesses that address community needs that would otherwise probably just go unmet. They also allow socially disadvantaged individuals and industries that maybe traditionally have not paid well to work for themselves and have more control over their earnings. Today, we are incredibly excited to see so many of our partner organizations join us to address a topic that on the surface may seem dry. I promise you it's not. It's awesome. It underpins everything. It is cooperative statistics, and it is going to be really good stuff. We know that cooperatives generate jobs and bring needed goods and services to people, especially when there are market failures. They operate in all areas of the economy: agriculture, utilities, food service, energy, financial services, insurance, construction, housing, healthcare, education. They are among the most resilient form of business. How do we know that? cooperative statistics. Data. Data has the power to prove that the cooperative model is among the most effective economic development tools. In 1926, the Cooperative Marketing Act charged a division of USDA with acquiring, analyzing, and disseminating statistical information on agricultural cooperative associations. So today, you will hear from the USDA Cooperative Program's Jim Wadsworth, who has the data to prove that agricultural cooperatives are among the oldest businesses in the United States, if not the entire world. In the 1930s, electric cooperatives were formed to provide services to 90% of rural residents who lacked electricity. 2022 data from the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association shows that cooperatives now power 56% of the nation's landmass and 92% of persistent poverty counties. Data from the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives and the Democracy at Work Institute supports the resiliency of the worker cooperative, a form of business that significantly benefits women and minorities. Worker cooperatives preserved jobs and performed better than conventional firms during the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we will hear more from Democracy at Work's Julian McKinley and Olga Prushinskaya. And how are cooperatives faring globally? Good question. You will hear from Paul Hazen, who will discuss a 4-country study by the U.S. Overseas Cooperative Development Council, which concludes, and I hope I'm not stealing your punchline here, Paul, that cooperative members are more likely to have above average and average incomes and are less likely to be poor. Future 2024 meetings will address the use of cooperatives in the prison system to help rehabilitate individuals who are incarcerated and provide economic avenues for them post-incarceration. We will also examine how urban cooperatives are forming ecosystems, and those ecosystems are providing opportunities for community development through worker ownership, cooperative housing, and community development. Our next meeting, coming up in May, will explore how cooperatives are assuring meaningful democratic control for all members through equitable cooperative governance. So now, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Wadsworth to talk with us on what we've learned from keeping track of agricultural cooperative statistics since before 1926. So Jim, take it away. I know it'll be great.
Good afternoon, and thank you to our new administrator, Betsy Dirksen-Londrigan, for kicking off today's meeting. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today, and I also want to thank everyone for joining us for this working group gathering. For my part, I'm going to tell a short story of USDA agricultural cooperative statistics, as you heard. As the meeting title indicates, we're going to jump back in time, 98 years and more. As Betsy mentioned, in 1926, the Cooperative Marketing Act was enacted. Cooperative leaders in Congress clearly saw the role that farmer cooperatives played within the food and fiber system in the United States and thought that USDA should assist cooperatives in their marketing and distribution of farm products. It was clear that jointly owned cooperatives allowed farmers to receive more than farm gate prices for their commodities and also to pay lower prices for supplies and other services than they otherwise would without owning cooperatives. And research has shown that co-ops have a yardstick effect on investor-owned and non-cooperative businesses, keeping them honest, if you will. Indeed, cooperatives are a self-help mechanism for producers as extensions of their farming businesses, and cooperatives have proven to be an effective alternative whereby farmers continue as masters of their own farming operations by personally owning cooperatives that carry out their outside needed marketing and input services at better prices. Part 1 of that act was to acquire, analyze, and disseminate economic, historical, and statistical information, and USDA has done just that. And this brings me to our discussion today. Technically, the department began collecting statistics from farmer co-ops even prior to the year 1900, but the aggregations we provide started in 1913. Prior to 1926, data collections were more piecemeal or for special co-op studies in the department. Then with the 1926 Act, USDA began collecting these statistics on a more formal and consistent basis. We collect financial data, specifics on commodities marketed and supplies and services sold, as well as operational data from the entire population of ag co-ops every year. So the question perhaps may be why? Why conduct data collection? Why is it important? The answer has several components. Data collection and analysis allows for tracking the status, trends, and progress of ag co-ops on both a year-to-year and time series basis, for the development of important benchmarks for co-ops to use to measure their businesses, and for other agribusinesses to use in that regard as well, for assisting with co-op strategic planning and other co-op planning activities, for use in cooperative technical assistance, which continues today in-house at USDA with individual co-op comparison reports we send to all our survey respondents, and also for special analyses we conduct for co-ops and others when that is requested, for contributing to co-op research and studies to further understand cooperatives and their impact on our agriculture sectors and the food and fiber economy overall, and for analyzing and reporting results of these data so as to contribute to the public good and providing a better understanding of co-ops, where they are and whence they came. And for USDA, this reporting includes bulletins, spreadsheets, and aggregated data for other agencies, researchers, stakeholders, and any interested party for that matter. This program has provided USDA with a direct link to the nation's farmer cooperatives. We've gotten to know them through the years, and they've gotten to know us. To provide some levity this afternoon, I'll note that a few have actually divorced us, as in they don't want to send their data, provide information or data anymore to us, and they say they get asked by too many people. But that includes very few, and overall our response rate is top-notch, with our collection acquiring 92 to 95% of total co-op business volume annually. Remember, this is a voluntary survey, but I must say that we do work to get those divorcees back, and we often do, usually when a change of management occurs. Next slide. So how far have co-ops come until today? Well, now I'll take a quick look, and I hope not to overwhelm you with data, but we at least need to review some important numbers and trends. This chart shows that there were 3,100 ag co-ops in 1913. The number then hitting the high water mark of 12,000 in 1929, and now to the plus or minus 1,660 co-ops that we think will report for 2023. Next slide. So we can see that there was a proliferation, you can go, yeah, thanks, of ag co-ops created in the 1920s, 5,000 added in fact. And these were both marketing and supply co-ops. I took a look back. Farm groups such as the Grange, Farmers Union, Cooperative Extension, government, and many others, along with the farmers themselves, helped develop many cooperatives to meet economic needs. Federal legislation, the Capper-Volstead Act of 1922, of course, is seen as providing some protections, helping to the formation of many marketing cooperatives, as in limited antitrust protection, that is. There were more than 10,000 ag co-ops from 1929 up until 1953, and then a pretty steady decline from there until today. And changing numbers were most often due to mergers and consolidations. Though, of course, there have been dissolutions, bankruptcies, and sales to non-co-op firms. But consolidations between co-ops themselves has been a major reason for the decline. We do note, however, that while the number of co-ops has dropped, those that remain continue to operate more than 9,500 locations in all 50 states. Thus, there remains a strong ag co-op presence in thousands of rural communities. While the number of co-ops declined over the years, business volume steadily increased, as the slide had shown, going up, with some fluctuations that were shown in the chart. This volume rose from $300 million in 1913, which translates to just more than $9 billion in real terms today, to what we think will be about $305 billion for 2023, the year that just ended. 2022 was the first time ag co-ops topped $300 billion in total business, and we expect that level to continue. From the 1920s, when co-ops proliferated to meet economic needs, more and more producers joined them, with a steady increase up to more than 7 million members overall. That number fluctuated, but mostly remained in that range until about 1964. An interesting finding is that researchers have pointed out that the 1950s saw many non-co-op farmers, if you will, join co-ops, given price instability and other ag economic factors that made co-ops attractive to them. Since then, numbers of members have steadily decreased, though the change has pretty much mirrored the change in numbers of commercial farmers. It was not because farmers were leaving the co-ops. There are just under 2 million members of ag co-ops today. Membership, and I should mention, membership numbers are a tricky one to follow. as many farmers belong to more than one co-op, perhaps one or two for marketing their products, especially if they grow more than one product, and then one or more for gaining supplies or services. And as we know, the income that co-ops earn is returned to member owners in the form of patronage and relieved allocated equity, or is retained in the co-op for strength and growth. This income was to the tune of a record $12.5 billion in 2022. And we also see that the ongoing operations of co-ops generate substantial revenues that circulate through communities, given employee earnings, that is $8.6 billion to the more than 185,000 employees in 22, and also business done with community businesses and organizations. I should add, too, that co-ops also had record assets of $125 billion. Those are assets owned by member owners. And I want to mention that we are seeing additional changes to the structure of ag co-ops. For example, we are finding more and more wholly owned or jointly owned LLCs, subsidiaries, and joint ventures as co-ops work to gain efficiencies. We have recorded 730 of these ventures by 411 co-ops in recent years. So co-ops have other layers of co-ops generated business and communities. Also, as mergers continue, and I note that most mergers these days are from joint positions of strength, co-ops are becoming more operationally diverse, with the regions and or states they cover expanding. So I see Robbie's already gone there. Now let's take a quick look at a couple of maps. These are developed by Debbie Rosh of our team, and we have a maps workbook of a co-op activity available for distribution. This slide has numbers of ag co-ops conducting business in states. This is beyond just headquarters. We see that Minnesota had the most co-ops operating within its borders with 182, followed by Texas 161, North Dakota 129, California 119, and Wisconsin 116. And you can peruse that slide to see the other numbers. Next slide, Robbie. Now let's also take a quick look at gross sales by state. And again, these are sales conducted by any co-ops in those states, not just those headquartered there. We see that Iowa had the most co-op volume with about $34 billion, followed by Minnesota with $27 billion, Illinois with 22, and then California with 19. The workbook these slides are from also include maps of memberships and dollar volumes by commodity and supply items for all the states. All these figures I mentioned provide just a snapshot of ag co-op's vast economic and operational impact. And we annually publish several products with these statistics. These products are listed on the final slide of my presentation here and are distributed by GovDelivery and by request. You can go back to Robbie, I wasn't there. By request. We answer a few hundred data requests or inquiries a year, many from the very co-ops that provide us with the data, but also from researchers, stakeholders, consultants, law firms, government departments, and many others. I'll mention yesterday, Land O'Lakes asked for some data. Next slide now. Co-ops stand the test of time. I'm going to wrap up these ag co-op statistics with a point we made a habit of discussing the last few years, and that is on cooperative longevity and sustainability. Last year, we published a bulletin on co-op longevity. In that report, we mentioned an outside business study that said that long-term successful companies were found to exhibit a clear sense of mission and a strong culture, the establishment of core competencies and strengths, a focus on relationships, the retention of employees, and support of and involvement in local communities. We reported ag co-ops exhibit all those very qualities, as those of us who work with co-ops well know, correct? And here's the evidence. As shown in this chart, there are currently 399 co-ops that are 100 years old or more, 24% of all co-ops. I know the presentation title said 23%, but I updated these numbers with current data, so we're at 24% now. 516 that are 75 to 99 years old, 31%, and 369 that are 50 to 74 years of age, 22%. This means that 77% of ag co-ops are 50 years old or older. This demonstrates the resiliency of the co-op business model and that many co-ops seem to excel at extending the growth and maturity phases of what economists and analysts often refer to as the business life cycle, which all businesses are subject to. Thriving within and working to extend those stages is what co-ops do, because co-ops were formed to operate and service member owners, and members' needed services continue. And indeed, that very concept leads to the impressive longevity we see in our ag co-ops. Next slide. Thanks. This next slide provides a timeline with selected statistics and information I had some fun with. It's a busy slide, and I'm not going to go over all of it in the interest of time. but I leave it for you to peruse on your own, and it should remind us of just how far ag co-ops have come through the years. In closing, there's a question posed on the timeline slide. How best does USDA collect and or report on these and perhaps other rural co-op data going forward? And I'll add, how important is the continuation of collecting ag co-op statistics in the future? These are questions that need to be addressed because given resource constraints and mission changes, we're not the same ag co-op research-based program we once were. But we remain convinced that statistics are definitely critically needed because they lead to a better understanding of cooperatives and their impact on different sectors in the economy. And most importantly, they're highly useful for helping the co-ops themselves. And we also ask, are there other rural cooperatives outside of ag that USDA should in some way work to report on? An analysis of the U.S. Census co-op question data that we've all heard about, or many of us, would be a good start for answering that latter question. And we hope to see that soon and assist in that reporting. Going forward, we'll be working on answering all of these questions. And we are also currently seeking ways to further automate our analysis and statistics to allow for dashboards that will make results easier to view and study. And finally, next slide, Robbie. Here are some of the statistical products we provide to cooperatives and the public, and all are available by request. I'll end here, and I'll acknowledge that our statistic team consists of Judy Rivera, Charita Coleman, Debbie Roush, and of course myself. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to learning more about co-op statistics this afternoon, and if necessary, answering any questions people may have of our Ag Statistics program. Now over to you, Margaret. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim, and thank you for taking on the mantle of agricultural cooperative statistics within USDA. You are a holder of a long and proud history, and this is a great way to start this conversation. So while the Cooperative Statistics Program can tell us a lot about the agricultural sector, it would be nice to know about other industries. So before we hear from our next set of speakers, we would like to, let's take a minute to think about these three questions on the slide. First question being, how do you use cooperative data currently in what you do? Second question, what data do you wish you had? And then the third question, imagine that you had access to all the data that you would want related to cooperative statistics. What would you do with that data? So just kind of mull over those questions. We'll come to it in the question and answer section, but we wanted to seed these questions before our next set of speakers. Next slide, please. So we are fortunate to have the next set of speakers with us from the U.S. Overseas Cooperative Development Council. We have Paul Hazen. He is the executive director of the OCDC. He joined that organization in February of 2012, and you can see his full bio in the chat. OCDC, he has been very formative in the research group to research, formulate, and share effective strategies for the development, performance, and growth of cooperatives in developing countries. Paul is certainly no stranger to us in the U.S. cooperative sector because he was the CEO of the National Cooperative Business Association for many years. So Paul is with us, and then we also have Dr. Judith Hermanson. She is the Director of International Cooperative Research Group within the OCDC, and she has designed and led programs and research studies for USAID, the World Bank, and the United Nations, amongst other organizations. So we are excited to have both of them from the OCDC with us today to share a little bit about the use of data that they are using. So Paul, take it away.
Thank you, Margaret. It's great to be here today. It's my pleasure to introduce our presentation, 3 studies and their outcomes, focus on grassroots. As you mentioned, my colleague, Judith Hermanson, will be giving our presentation in a moment. But I want to make a couple of points about our research. First of all, we start off with cooperatives are locally led development. And next slide, please. Our mission and vision at You can go to the next slide, please. Okay, our mission and vision at OCDC is very clear, and our goal is to increase effective international cooperative development through knowledge-based enhancement of impact and increased uptake of cooperative development as a strategy in a country's journey toward locally led development. The International Cooperative Research Group collaborates, partners, and co-creates with local researchers and cooperative development stakeholders. We carry out rigorous, locally led research that bridges the gap between theory and practice. In the International Cooperative Research, we provide research, learning, and application of the model. Research activity that builds trust, ownership, and the uptake of outcomes through engagement with our local stakeholders. This collaborative approach amplifies our research outcomes, deepens local uptake of concepts, and thus changes lives. Next slide, please. You can see OCDC's members that are listed here are leaders in economic and social development, and we enjoy a unique collaboration with the U.S. Agency for International Development through the Cooperative Development Program. The Cooperative Development Program is a global initiative that invests in cooperatives and credit unions around the world to build social cohesion, stabilize economies, and support local communities. USAID supports overseas cooperative development through partnerships with US-based cooperative development organizations. OCDC and our research group is focused on collecting and verifying new data-driven evidence and developing data-informed internal and external solutions for cooperatives. Now, to drill down deeper into our data, it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Judith Hermanson, to share the outcomes of 3 grassroots initiatives. Judith, you're on mute.
I was saying earlier, I keep learning that lesson, my apologies. I was saying thank you, Paul, and thank you everybody for inviting us, the hosts of this webinar and everybody else who is here. It's really a pleasure to come and share some of the data that we have that we believe is really important. We believe that cooperatives, as I'm sure many of you do as well, are an important driver of equity and broad-based inclusive prosperity globally. And so I'll be talking today about the research that we do outside of the United States in other countries. Our research approach, as Paul was mentioning, is grounded in the premise, grounded in rigor and local partnerships and engagement. And our evidence data, partly answering one of the questions posed earlier, informs sound decision-making, bridges research outcomes to application, increases the impact cooperative development on the lives of people. So for that reason, I'm focusing today on outcomes of 3 studies at the grassroots. This is going to be, by necessity of time, a quick overview, but we will put the links to the studies in the chat for those who might want to delve further. And also, you can always visit us and access some of our resources at the ICRG Resource Center on the OCDC website. Next slide, please. An ICRG signature study set out to answer the question, what difference do cooperatives make? This was the study that was mentioned earlier, and the headlines, the punchline was stolen, but I think it's worth mentioning again. As we asked a simple question, and with a hypothesis that we would find a measurable difference. Of course, we didn't know. That's the joy of and the tension of research. For cooperative, we wanted to see if there was a measurable difference for cooperative members and for their communities. Mixed method study, 4 countries that you see there, Kenya, Peru, Poland, and Philippines. Very different countries, but we use the same design for comparability of data to look at the social and economic impact for members across the various sectors that cooperatives are working in, from agriculture, housing, finance, beyond. And we compared the outcomes, economic, social outcomes for members against comparable non-members, people who were not members of cooperatives in those countries. And the results showed a distinctive positive outcome that we were very pleased to see. And there are many more outcomes, but I'm going to share just 4 with you. If we could, if we move to the next slide, and this is the one that kind of really the highlight, I think, in across all 4 countries, very different countries. The members of cooperatives had higher incomes, were less likely to be poor or very poor when compared to the non-members, and also triangulated with average income in the country. So really quite astounding. Next slide, please. And that's greater detail that we don't have time to go into today. So they also, members, enjoyed greater social capital than people who were not members. This particular one looks at trust, but there are other dimensions as well, such as connection to networks and access to other resources in their communities and that were not enjoyed by non-members. Next slide, please. Very importantly, the members of cooperatives in these 4 countries, women members, enjoyed greater equity than their counterpart who were not members of it. And in fact, in Kenya, the outcomes caused the government to mobilize an initiative to bring more members, recruit more members into more women members into formal cooperatives. They yielded distinct benefits for higher incomes for women and greater agency as well. Next slide, please. And now taking a different slant, we also wondered, well, how did the non-members feel? And it's very interesting that also in most of the findings indicated that the cooperatives, people who were not members of cooperatives, also noticed a benefit within their communities by the presence of cooperatives there, from infrastructure to jobs to overall quality of life. So cooperatives helping and supporting communities at large. Next slide, please. So that's the once over lightly for the what difference do cooperatives make. We also wanted to find out about cooperatives in the time of COVID. We've talked a lot and we've mentioned the resilience of cooperatives, but we really wanted to understand how cooperatives fared during this vexing time. And so we looked at the experience in 6 sub-Saharan African countries for which we had a pre-COVID baseline. And the methods included survey and focus group with leaders. The initial aim of the study was to look at the economic performance of the cooperatives, but I'm going to focus today on some other findings that came. The economic performance held generally. Next slide, please. There was some variability, as was be expected, and changes in our measurement of business resilience. But overall, the cooperatives in the study, it was a small study, continued to operate. But there was, and I think this is important as we're talking about cooperative business model, the striking pattern, of social solidarity and responsiveness among the cooperatives. These were very consistent across all types. Next slide. The next slide shows that there was considerable innovation to meet member needs and to adapt business processes during the COVID crisis. Tough times test things, and the cooperatives rose to the moment. Flexibility was one of the major strengths that they had that enabled them to assist their members to adjust their businesses as they navigated this difficult time. And these were cooperatives in quite rural and sometimes really remote areas. So lockdown, food shortages, lack of transportation, a lot of things going on for those communities. And of course, the general anxiety that we all remember. The commitment of the members and the leaders enabled the cooperatives to meet some of the needs that were created by COVID. Next slide, please. These cooperatives that we studied here tended to take a very inclusive approach and accommodated a significant uptake in demand for membership in cooperatives. And maybe not surprising that there was that, but cooperatives responded to that instead of saying, well, we just have our resources for our current members, but they brought in new members. And they expanded their services beyond their core functions. And as you can see here, these included provision of personal protective equipment, food, health training, shelter, other ways to meet the needs of both their members, and I also want to underscore members of the community. So next slide, please. The respondents of the surveys and the focus group, this just gives you a sense of some of the emotion behind this, overwhelmingly attributed the resilience and the importance of the co-ops and their ability to adapt and adjust during COVID to the commitment of their leaders and of the members, and to the trust that all of that together engendered for cooperatives. Next slide, please. So these are some of the ways in which these cooperatives were able to weather and even if they had a slight economic toll, the leaders believed that their cooperatives have been strengthened in essential ways during COVID because of their calling upon their cooperative resources and attributes. They are able to exhibit resilience. Next slide. The two studies that I've glossed over rather quickly because of that, but I would love to come back and do that in-depth discussion with you at another time. The two studies that we've already touched have talked about social inclusion, and I want in different ways. And this last one, I want to highlight that theme as well, particularly how they can benefit women in sub-Saharan Africa, where a disproportionate number of women work within the informal economy, often lack formal education and lack agency. Next slide, please. This is a 13-country study, and it was conducted by a research consortium of which we were a member. And we examined the economies and value chains within these countries to identify opportunities for women's empowerment, economic empowerment. And cooperatives were not the primary focus of this. It was economic empowerment across the board. And it came apparent pretty early in the study that there was kind of a missing middle, what is shown on this slide as collectives. Cooperatives could be a pathway for many, many women to already are to some extent, but could be even more so for women to take advantage and of their features to improve their own economic situation, allow them greater market access and greater economic return. Next slide. The ICRG is taking a deeper dive into the data of this study, and we will be publishing a paper on it, but we are finding that the training and upskilling that are provided by cooperatives help to bridge the educational gaps. The cooperative practice of democratic governance and its provision of leadership and learning opportunities across the board support a woman's overall agency, and meaning her ability and willingness to act and to decide for herself. And also worth pointing out here, for those of you who are wondering why you're looking at these little squiggles, is that there is another characteristic of cooperatives that underlie all of this, which is the social bonds, and particularly important in this study that this slide is from a study that we conducted with a Kenyan research partner that shows the bonds of that exist in formal and formal cooperatives for women generally, and then also for women. And this enables that trust to develop within this space. Next slide, please. And our analysis indicates that these close social ties and the existing trust and atmosphere created make cooperatives a safe and conducive pathway to economic inclusion and empowerment through soft skills, hard skills, and economic opportunity provided by and through cooperatives for women in many countries, or the countries that we studied in sub-Saharan Africa, but we also believe beyond that and in other places as well. Next slide. So coming to the end of my my presentation here, my rapid fire through these 3 studies, I've shared evidence that cooperatives are making a significant and measurable difference at the grassroots. And that's important. We talk about what we want our data to do because it informs policies as well as encourages people to join cooperatives and cooperative leadership. We've also explored a bit how, through the data, how the cooperative business model makes this happen. The evidence I've shared is from countries beyond the United States, and I know that the focus here is the United States, but even if contexts might be different, the dynamics and principles may also apply in certain circumstances in the United States, and maybe understanding some of the grassroots phenomena might be helpful too as the cooperative sector evolves in this country. In any event, I thank you all very much. I hope that some of this research may stimulate your thinking, and thank you again for being here, your presence, and your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judith. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for that wonderful glimpse into what is happening with cooperatives internationally. Thank you for that. So now let's return domestically. And next slide. We are fortunate to have 2 people from the Democracy at Work Institute and the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. We have Julian McKinley. He is the co-executive director for partnerships and growth at the Democracy at Work Institute. And we also have Olga Prushinskaya, I had that correct, who is the director of metrics and impact analysis. She's a data scientist with a background in public health and a focus on health equity. She leads the biannual census of worker cooperatives at DOWI and the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. So we will put their bios into the chat. So without further ado, let's turn it over to Julian and Olga.
Thanks so much, Margaret. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here today. Thank you for the opportunity to share our research and what it says about worker cooperatives in the United States. So today we plan to share a look at what worker cooperatives in the US look like based on research we've led since the founding of our organization. The data we present is based on a census of businesses we've conducted annually through 2016 and biannually since then. The census is conducted in partnership with our sister organization, the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, and was initially designed to get as current and accurate account of worker cooperatives as possible. It has evolved in purpose and scope over time, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. My colleague, Olga Prushinskaya, will provide a deep dive into our latest findings, but I want to begin by giving just a little bit of context for this research by shedding light on our organization's work and our role in the field. Next slide. So DOWI was founded to expand worker ownership to communities locked out of good jobs and opportunities to own businesses, particularly workers of color, recent immigrants, and low-wage workers. We are the national nonprofit who's dedicated to growth of the field, and we play a key role in bridging communities from practitioners to policymakers, ESOPs to cooperatives and emerging models. Our work, which includes research, business innovation, technical assistance, and education, is all in support of a generational shift in who is developing worker-owned firms, who is benefiting from them, and how they're resourced and supported. Next slide. So we're currently celebrating 10 years of service to the field. And we were started by the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. And this relationship is incredibly important to the support that we provide to cooperative developers and worker cooperatives across the country. Together, we co-produce the economic census of worker cooperatives, which we're going to be sharing today. And we also co-host the Worker Co-op Conference, which is a national conference, which will be held in Chicago from September 12th to 14th this year. So you can mark it on your calendars. Next slide. So we have a highly collaborative approach to our work. USDA has also been essential to the success that we've seen in the field over the past decade. We have received USDA funding since the very beginning of our organization's history, enabling really a robust support network for worker cooperatives across the country, particularly the businesses and developers in rural communities who are otherwise disconnected from the larger ecosystems of support that have TA and education opportunities on the ground. You'll see here a number of partners we work closely with, including some who are USDA funded. They operate across the country and represent a variety of services that lead to growth and success of worker co-ops, including business conversions, business startups, and some industry-specific approaches to meet the needs of workers. And I'll now pass it on to my colleague, Olga, who will lead us through the data.
Thanks so much, Jillian. I am really excited to be here with you all today just to give a little bit taste of our data collection on worker co-ops. So if you go to the next slide. For those of you here that might not be as familiar with worker co-ops, they're a form of business that's owned and controlled by its workers. The ownership allows the worker members to control operations in the strategic direction of the business and to directly benefit from the business's success. Worker co-ops are typically values-driven businesses that really put worker and community benefit at the core and their purpose. And then this presentation, I'll also be talking about democratic workplaces. So for us, worker co-ops and democratic workplaces go hand in hand. While worker co-ops have these two tenets of financial ownership by the workers and democratic management, democratic workplaces tend to be businesses where the workers can't necessarily own the organization in the legal sense, such as nonprofits or collectives, but we see them as really similar forms and we collect data on them together. If you go to the next slide. Worker co-ops make business ownership accessible to a lot of different folks. So that could include people interested in being a business owner, but not wanting to do it alone. It could include people experiencing different types of barriers to finding good jobs. So formerly incarcerated folks, people with language barriers, recent immigrants, and others who have limited access to the competitive marketplace. Worker co-ops can also be used as a tool by people who already work for themselves, but are challenged by finding enough work or good work on their own, such as contractors or gig workers. And the form can also be useful in labor-intensive industries, since industries like manufacturing, construction, home care, et cetera, are so hard on the body. Better working conditions that worker co-ops provide can really go a long way to helping workers in those industries. And lastly, worker co-ops can be a really strong tool for people who are interested in working somewhere where their values are at the forefront of their labor. Next slide, please. So Julian has already said a lot about our enterprise census work to understand the field. That's the research that I'll be pulling from today in this presentation. And I'll really just be covering some really high level descriptive data. Again, we have a time limitation, but if this piques your interest, we hope you really go to our website and engage with some of the other reports that we've released over the last 10 years of doing this research. And the data that I'll be presenting today, which was from our most recent round of data collection just last year, we're going to be publishing that hopefully within just a month or two. So you all will be able to access that and really dive more into some of the outcomes data. So information about business performance and the ongoing impact of the pandemic, all of those will be things covered there. And it's important to note also that we'll have the de-identified data sets from all 10 years of us doing this research available for folks to apply to access on our website in the event that any of you want to do a deep dive in this data or know anybody else who might be interested. We definitely want folks to access that as well. Next slide, please. So today, like I mentioned, this is going to be about the data we just collected last year. So one of the most important purposes of our census work is to give us a sense of scope of the field. So in 2023, we identified a total of 711 worker co-ops and democratic workplaces. We do know that this is an undercount as to national level organizations that are working to collect this data. We know that we have a lot of blind spots, so we rely a lot on our local regional partners, on the developers who are supporting co-ops, but we know we have an especially hard time reaching and identifying recent startups, recent conversions, businesses that aren't working with one of our partners to launch. So for all of those reasons, we actually think that the real number of worker cooperatives and democratic workplaces is closer to 1,000. And we estimate that those 711 firms employ almost 11,000 workers and bring in a combined revenue of about 500 million annually. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, another big purpose of our census is to understand growth and distribution of businesses geographically across industries, across sectors. So this map really allows us to see kind of the clusters of worker cooperatives that we identified. So as you can see, we have big clusters in California and New York, Wisconsin, Massachusetts, Puerto Rico. But we also have a lot of growth in rural cooperatives that we've seen over the last 10 years. And that growth is undoubtedly due to the dedicated funding provided by the USDA to support co-op development. So you can see that in the circle represented on the right of this slide. Next slide, please. This slide identifies some of the common industries that the businesses we identified represent. It's really important to note also that although these are the most common industries, there are industries where we're seeing kind of trending growth in worker cooperatives. So those include home care, childcare, taxi transportation, and solar installation and some of the related work there. Next slide, please. Another purpose of the census is to really help us understand what a typical worker co-op looks like. So from our data, we can see that worker cooperatives in the US tend to be pretty small. So the median number of workers of the 711 businesses we identified was 5, and the median annual revenue for those businesses was about 600,000 annually. And of course, there's really notable outliers to these medians. So the largest worker co-op in the US has several thousand workers. There's also differences that we see in these figures when it comes to businesses that are worker cooperatives from the start versus those that convert to a form from a conventional business. So conversions represent about 30% of all the worker co-ops we identified, and those tend to be much larger than what these median numbers represent. Next slide, please. Another thing that the census really helps us understand is the workforce. So who are the workers who work at worker cooperatives? As you can see from the race, ethnicity, and gender charts on this slide, the majority of workers at worker cooperatives are BIPOC folks and women. So it's important to note. And next slide, please. Lastly, another big role for the census for us is to help us understand the biggest unmet needs of worker cooperatives and democratic workplaces. This information helps both DOWI and the US Federation of Worker Co-ops, but also the whole supportive ecosystem that exists to support these businesses who provide services like technical assistance, legal support, accounting. It really helps all of us orient and understand which needs are we not quite meeting yet and how we can better support these businesses. So here you see a list of just the biggest needs that co-ops said that they had when we collected this data last year. And as you can see, looking through this list, this really aligns with what really small businesses need in general as well. So you can see that worker co-ops consistently state that offering quality and affordable health insurance and other benefits to worker is one of the biggest struggles that they have. But you also see needs such as like getting support for business expansion and receiving support building skills on staff in areas such as marketing and financial management. So again, that was kind of a 10,000 foot view, really quick numbers throwing out of our data. And we hope to keep engaging you all and doing some brainstorming around how we can make it useful and how we can align it with all of the other data collection efforts that we're hearing about today as well. I'll pass it back to Julian.
Thanks, Olga. So that's a really quick look at our latest data, but it also allows us to not just understand the experience of worker co-ops on the ground, but also identify some trends that aligned with the work that we're doing in communities. Next slide. And so I want to touch on just a few of the trends that we are seeing that are contributing to the growth of worker ownership across the country. The first is who is using this model, right? So beginning about 10 years ago, we witnessed a significant shift in ethnicity and gender of those using the model. Before the 2010s, the model was mostly used by individuals seeking an exit from the mainstream economy, escape the rat race, if you will. But today, many are using the form to access the mainstream economy and an opportunity to fully benefit from the fruits of their labor that they are otherwise denied in the workplace. And so that looks like an increase in workers of color and an increase in the proportion of workers who are women in worker cooperatives. The model is also being used by increasingly as a business retention tool. So specifically to mitigate the large number of anticipated baby boomer owned business closures in the coming years. And so it's being used by a lot of individual business owners to transition ownership of their business to their employees. Essentially as a succession strategy. In some cases, it is an exit strategy for business owners who maybe they're not necessarily ready to retire, but they are ready to relinquish sort of the burden and all the tasks of running the business on their own. And then lastly, there is a rise in contingent work that is contributing to increased use of this model, particularly as Americans struggle with inflation and wages have been slow to keep up. They're increasingly going to the gig economy to support their income. Organizing gig workers within cooperatives provides an opportunity to increase wages, to improve work and to improve working conditions, which are critical challenges in the growing gig economy. There's also, I'm going to bounce around a little bit just in terms of, or just to keep time in terms of our presentation here. But there's also a focus on worker cooperatives at the federal, state, and local level. We have never seen a period in our country with greater support for worker ownership, so it's really exciting. And this is highlighted by the State Small Business Credit Initiative, the Worker Ownership Readiness and Knowledge Act, California's Office of Employee Ownership, which is new, and various municipalities that we work with are using worker ownership as a business preservation strategy. And then lastly, the research on worker cooperatives is evolving in terms of access and subject. So we have partnered with the University of Wisconsin Center of Cooperatives to analyze the impact of ownership on individual workers. We released the first study of its kind I don't know, a few years ago now, maybe 3-4 years ago now, and are currently planning to redo that study. But what it allows us to do is really take a look at what does ownership mean for individuals? How does it influence their wages? How does that impact the ability to support a family? How does it change their workplace experience? And does it have an impact on their civic participation, which we saw, it does. And so that's a pretty exciting data point to dig into. And there's also a great need for researchers across the country to access available data. So supporting research institutions so that they can build on the research that has been done previously to inform the work of the future. That requires breaking down silos, doing research in new ways, having conversations across industries, sharing data sets, and also allowing the workers within businesses to have more of a role in shaping what some of the research looks like so that they can see a direct benefit of that research. Next slide, please. That's it for us. We want to thank you all for allowing us to share this work and hope that it's useful. To learn more, you can visit institute.coop or follow us on social media, which is weare.we.
Thank you so much, Olga. Thank you so much, Julian. That was a great overview, a glimpse into what is happening in the worker co-op sector here in the United States. Thank you for that. So next up, we would like to involve everyone in the discussion. There are about 38 people on the webinar yet, and we would like to engage people in those 3 questions that were posed at the beginning of this webinar. So the first question, what we will do is take some time with question number 1. People can offer suggestions, observations in the chat, or they can go ahead and raise their hand and unmute themselves and share that. And then we will move on to question number 2, and then finally question number 3, and we will wrap it up. So given that, let's turn to that first question of what data do you currently use? And feel free to put some thoughts into chat, raise your hand, however you would like to, feel free to communicate.
And please, if you'd like to, unmute yourself and discuss your response, and also turn on your camera. Shar, would you like to unmute yourself?
Sure. So we currently use cooperative data to educate community leaders when we give presentations, and also to elected officials, and educating them about the impact, the quantity and the impact that cooperatives have in their respective communities. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that, Shar.
I noticed
Noemi.
that.
Oh, go ahead. Noemi, we're going to put you on the spot.
Sure. Hey, so just earlier today, we were talking with a group that was interested in doing a housing co-op development, and they actually said, do you know of a place we could take a field trip to? And so it was great to be able to say, like, well, you could check out, this housing co-op that's not too far away from you, and, give them some information about that. And it was also great to be able to look up like what was closer to their location.
So the actual co-ops behind the data points.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with all the examples that other people are giving about, like, how the impact of co-ops in aggregate and how they relate to, a particular location, or what impact they're having. But I think, especially early in the co-op development process, people just want to see an example that may be similar to what they're thinking of.
Great observation. Thank you for that. Paul, you had a comment. Paul Hazen.
Yeah, I use it, the data, domestic data, in advocating for co-ops in Capitol Hill. Just basic data, like how many members of cooperatives are in a particular state and the number of co-ops. I think it's important to remind policymakers that they have a big constituency. I have to tell you, the data that came out of the study that Judith presented on what difference do cooperatives make has been a game changer on Capitol Hill, to be able to explain, here is the actual impact on people's lives in these countries. And it's been very powerful, and hope we're going to have more data like that to even make our case stronger.
Thank you for that. A quick comment. Robbie, could you turn the slide deck off so that we can see each other a little bit more? Thank you. Great. Nicole, you made a comment. Would you like to share a little bit more about that?
Yes. Hi, Margaret. I I was just saying that what we use it for currently is what everybody else does to educate people and legislators. But what I'd like to know is how many people actually serve on the board of directors for the cooperatives that they're on. I've never seen that number for the state of Montana, and I don't know if that is available across the nation, partly because that position is a voluntary position. And I think it kind of leads into people volunteering for their communities to make them a better place as well. So
Kind of getting at the social capital that is inherent within the community, thanks to the leadership serving on a board.
exactly, that's a great way to say it, Margaret. Thank you.
My pleasure. Um, Judith might have another observation that she would like to share.
We have found that data provides a marvelous platform for discussion and convening and dialogue. We have been very successful as part of the process that we use actually for engagement. And as we were mentioning, we really were very interested in the application of the data and from the specific research that we do. But even beyond that, just bringing different stakeholders into the room to discuss that may not normally come together, to discuss a common set of facts and knowledge and evidence, and explore what the implications might be for their particular area of responsibility or role and what it might mean there. We find that's really been very, very powerful and engaging for people as well. Helps them to really internalize the data.
Thanks for that observation. Paul, you have your hand raised, and then after that, Julian.
Well, I was just going to comment and follow up on Nicole's question about directors. At one time, we had a report and a study on the impact that co-op directors had beyond the co-op as they would learn about governance and at the co-op level, they would take that to other parts of the community. Run for the local school board, run for the legislature, things like that, and the social impact that they had from their training at the co-op level, being able to apply elsewhere in the community. That's very, very old now, but that would be a very interesting study in today's environment.
Thank you for that, Paul. Julian.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret. So two things come to mind in addition to what everyone has shared here. Certainly on the advocacy side, this data is invaluable. But for like worker cooperatives are, I think, such a smaller segment of the economy that they also sort of need to be not just this data certainly needs to be shared, but it also needs to come along with a certain amount of education about what the co-op model is, and for people to see the co-ops exist in, if it's not their community, they need to see it exist in another community. And so, the map that we have is usually a great starter for people to say, oh, okay, they're popping up here and there. Is there sort of either a state or a city that's a little bit like ours that I may be able to see this happening in? And then the other side of it is for business owners themselves, existing business owners or employees, to understand how they can plug into this model. For employees, it's really about understanding that, yes, they can be business owners together and providing sort of like an on-ramp towards learning how to do that.
Thank you for that. Shar, you have your hand up.
Julian, do you have like telepathic, like psychic abilities? Because I was just going to say the same thing. So ditto. We at Cooperative Development Services in the Upper Midwest, as a co-op development center, teach a course on cooperatives, and a lot of some folks think that even though Minnesota in particular is the #1 co-op state in the nation, that it's some alternative like form of business, that it's kind of weird, or that people seem to have a discomfort level, and once you start talking about it. But when you give examples, specifically we do for worker co-ops, we point to examples that they may relate to and that they may be familiar with already, but don't know that it's a worker co-op. So that's also how we use current data. Thank you.
Thank you, Shar. Judith, you have another comment to share?
Yes, and I should have mentioned this earlier. We're focused on the research and the way that various ways we bridge that to application. But one very important stream of our work as being sort of learning from the data and so forth is the translation of that data and and research into tools that are practical can help the co-ops to improve their operations plan, whatever the needs are. So we use the data to identify gaps and work with others to try to fill them.
Yes, thank you for that. Stacy, would you like to unmute yourself and share the comment that you put into the chat?
Absolutely. Thank you, Margaret. So what we use it for, I'm from the state of Iowa, and last year that we launched the Iowa Center for Employee Ownership, which is an amazing resource hub for businesses in Iowa. Fortunately, we have a lot of ESOPs in the state. We don't have so many worker cooperatives. In fact, there's like one that we're aware of. So we rely heavily on this kind of data to show that it is a viable option, especially in the rural areas, the underserved population areas, as far as the succession planning goes. I think, Julian, you had mentioned that. And, that silver tsunami is a big thing. And we're seeing so many closures in the rural areas just because there's nobody to keep it open. But yeah, if we put that option into the workers' hands, into the employees' hands, to the owners' hands, it seems to be a solution that works, but we just don't have any data here in Iowa. So thank you so much for putting that out. It's just so essential to the work that we do here. So can't thank you enough.
Thank you. Thank you for that observation from the great state of Iowa. Yes. Chris, if you would like to unmute, you have an observation from the rural food access perspective. And if Chris isn't, Chris said that using statistics from, are you there? Okay. Using statistics from successful food hubs and grocer co-ops in the attempt to organize more folks when addressing rural food access challenges. Thank you for that. Abby Anderson, would you like to unmute?
Yes, happy to. And sorry, it's very chaotic in the background. But yeah, I'm at USAID with the Cooperative Development Program, and we actually just finalized our annual report. And one of the ways that we use cooperative statistics is when advocating for how cooperatives advance locally led development, as well as women's economic empowerment. So we just did a highlight on gender inclusion and women's economic empowerment, highlighting an individual co-op we work with. And we use a lot of these statistics to really advocate and drive that point home. I think there was another question about what we would like to see in future statistics. And I think something I'd love to see is more gender and sex disaggregated data as well, like by sector and country. That would be very nice. And I mean, it's a big ask, but that would be great, especially when we're talking about how cooperatives are advancing women's participation and advancing livelihoods. Thanks.
Thank you, Abby. And thanks for your work at USAID. Yes. Jim Wadsworth, you had an observation about egg co-op board size.
Oh, it's just reacting to the question about Montana. Yeah, we try to collect a number of directors on ag co-ops, and as we see, as cooperatives are larger, of course, they have larger boards, especially the real big ones that are very multi-state. And but one thing we also we're trying to grasp a little bit of diversity, and of course, ag co-ops are, their membership is, mostly, white people. So, but we do gather we're seeing about 3.2% only on the boards of ag co-ops are women. I would like to see that higher, and there's a couple of issues there, but so we're seeing that, but we do see that CEOs and general managers, about 11% are women, so, and that's going up every year, it seems, so that's good. So, but yeah, it's not a real diverse population. You know, there is in the South, but those co-ops seem to be separate from the main ag ones. So,
thank you for that perspective of 100 years of data. Yes, thank you. Arda, would you like to unmute and share an observation?
Hi there, everybody. Thanks so much for the incredible presentation. I'm a bit more, I guess, on the research and consulting side, and I'm very passionate about like scaling the overall co-op ecosystem and translating, like, it's essentially how do we burst the bubble, right? For typical investors and CFIs, we're already all too familiar with this incredible data, and doing that storytelling for people who are like just close, like just neighboring, who are already doing impact investment or already doing the kind of like accelerator work, and you know, getting them to not be frightened of what success looks like in this sector using this kind of data.
Great, thank you for that. I'm just looking at the chat, and it seems to be kind of a little bit of back and forth with sharing some information. Nicole says data rocks. Well said, Data. Yes. Any other thoughts? Especially thoughts related to what, a little more discussion on what data you wish you had. Jim, go ahead.
It's just a thought I'd like to get across, and I think everyone knows this. Data is one of those things that's not real sexy all the time. People take it for granted, but then when they want it, they want it. It's a big job. It's a tedious process, and as things get more automated, it should become easier. Of course, that takes resources. That's the problem. You know, we have limited resources. So, but it's one of those things that's so important that it needs to continue. You know, I can see in the food co-op sector, really, knowing what each food co-op, the ones that are successful, what are they doing right? You know, those stories, and that used to be real important to our ag co-op technical assistance when we were providing that for existing co-ops. And I spent my first 12 years doing mostly that. Using our data and comparing it to theirs, and then looking at their inventory practices and looking at all the things they did, that was the most valuable thing to those co-ops to try to improve, knowing what their cousins were doing. So, yeah, data is, and I would love to see more and more data across sectors and these different types of cooperatives, not just ag. That's my thing, but I like to compare co-op sectors to co-op sectors, in certain variables. I just think it'd be really interesting. But once again, it's getting that data and having someone doing it, and I don't want it to be all AI, but we'll see. I'll stop there.
Thank you for that. Noemi, in the chat, do you want to elaborate? You made a comment. I wish we had a data cooperative.
Yeah. Somebody involved with the Data Cooperatives Working Group just published a draft of a handbook on creating a data cooperative, and I've been making my way through it, and it's just really exciting. I've been part of the Data Commons Cooperative for a very long time, and this is one of those things that you can't do by yourself, right? Like being able to gather data requires coordination, and we in the cooperative sector should know how to coordinate, since that's what we do. But it's just really been interesting to look at the, what it takes to put together a data cooperative, and everything from the education to get less well-versed tech people up to speed, so that there's equity in being able to access and understand what the data is about. So, all the way up to like, what are the technical specifications for actually storing and transferring data. But, keeping in mind that all this data is about people, and that they have uh, a, it would be great if they had some benefit from having the data collected about them, and what can we give back to the people whose data we're collecting so that it's useful to them. So yeah, they're singing my song is what I'm saying.
Thank you for that, Noemi. I'm going to take liberty, and I'd like to pose a question to Judith and Paul. In preparation for this webinar, I came across the International Labor Organization, and they were trying to make a case for cooperatives, for countries to start collecting similar types of data about cooperatives so that there could be comparisons about what's happening with cooperatives worldwide. Are either of you aware of some of the initiatives with the International Labor Organization? I was trying to find a US contact and I just couldn't.
Well, yes, we do know about that because the ILO was asking OCDC to collect that data domestically, and of course our focus is international. So they have quite a project at the ILO in working with national governments and the departments in those countries that are collecting data on cooperatives and trying to get that commonality working. So I think they've got upwards to 100 countries that they've already worked with. But yeah, there's no one in the U.S. that, to my knowledge, that is working with them, and I think it's a shame that we don't participate in that. Judith, I don't have anything to add to that.
No, just to say that they're doing some very important work, I think, and we're in dialogue with them a lot.
Great, thank you for that. Well, as we've got a few minutes left, why don't we transition to that final question? Imagine data about cooperatives is readily available and offers exactly everything you need. How would you use it? How would you use it further if unlimited resources, unlimited information? And I think people started to touch upon that in our initial part of the discussion. But go ahead, Judith.
I didn't know if you wanted it in the chat or just to raise, but offhand, we work internationally, and if we had all of the data that was already there, or we would want to use it to show how cooperatives really do drive broad-based inclusive development. And a lot of people, not in this room, but a lot of people think of co-ops as ag organizations, but it's more than that. And also as I was trying to point out in the study that I mentioned on women's inclusion, it's not necessarily that the co-ops are it, but it achieves a larger goal through cooperatives in a way that you want. And somehow, often people think of co-ops as just being the answer by itself, whereas actually they're part of a process and they can lead to achievement of many objectives, I think, in this country as well. So that's what I would want to do if I had all the data in the world, and in our small way and having some impact, I'm happy to say we are exactly trying to do that.
Thank you for that. Any other? Oh, go ahead, Olga. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think in my wildest co-op data dreams, for worker co-ops specifically, I think we're starting to kind of like delve more deeply into understanding job quality and worker well-being through like standardizing how we define those things in the field, just so we even have a shared understanding when we talk about a quality job. So in my dreams, I hope we one day have like very plentiful data on the different impacts on both the individual and the community, just from working at a worker co-op, the families, the neighborhoods, etc. So yeah, that's definitely my dream.
Wonderful dream. I'd love to be part of that dream. Um, Julian, do you have any closing thoughts?
Oh, I mean, so first of all, I think the conversation that we've had is it's incredibly helpful for us to be able to not just share our information and hear what it brings up for people, but to also listen to what Paul and Judith and James shared in terms of the research that they've done. You know, we are, as Olga mentioned, increasingly trying to nail down exactly what does job quality look like, what is the impact of ownership on individuals. So we are not just excited about what the future holds in terms of being able to dive into that work, but continuing conversations. And I think that that actually strengthens the research that we're able to do, in collaboration with others.
I think that is a wonderful thought, a set of thoughts to close our conversation today. Today being 3.14, March 14th, Pi Day, statistics, numbers. It's fitting that that we're having this conversation on 3.14. And so I want to thank all of our speakers, did a wonderful job. Thank you for the work that you do in making the case and helping us better understand what's happening in the cooperative economy. So thank you everyone for attending, and be sure to join us in May. We'll have a date forthcoming for a conversation about equitable cooperative governance, assuring meaningful democratic control for all members. So on behalf of all of us here at USDA Rural Development and the Secretary of Agriculture, thank you for participating. Have a good day.